strategic in the use of CSR, and 2 years ago set up the Inclusive Business Imperative. It is my pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of PBSP, Rafael Rapa Lopa. Rapa?
Thank you, Bill. Let me just begin the forum by thinking, while I was sitting there listening to the earlier panel, and people started talking about whether IB is better off without government. I started to ask myself whether the panelists that will be here now would really want to still talk about what they want to do. But really, in that sense, as I was listening and towards the end when Marcos sort of asked the question what the private sector thinks they need from government, all the more we can see that even as we recognize the innovation and entrepreneurial push that private sector makes, clearly private sector doesn't operate in a vacuum. And I think that's why it's very important and imperative to really also understand what different governments in different countries are actually trying to do in so far as promoting inclusive business. And of course, I have a very distinguished panel to actually help us in this process. Just quickly introduce some of all of them to my immediate right. Of course, very known to everybody in the Filipino community, primarily because he's one of the champions of inclusive business and social entrepreneurship in the country, none other than Senator Paulo Benigno Aquino. Also want to recognize our next panelist. He's the ambassador of the Republic of Peru to Thailand. Very happy he was able to join us today to also share Peru's interest in inclusive business, and also being the host country in the next APEC meeting. We would like to hear more from our next panelist, Mr. Ambassador Felix Denegre. Our third panelist is our friend from Mexico. He is the director for international He has served as minister representative for NAFTA in Canada on behalf of the Mexican government. Third member of our panel is Mexico's general director for international trade rules and Ministry of Economy, none other than Mr. Carlos Pineda. And of course, last but not the least, our panelist from Japan, who is a director for international organization of Japan's International Affairs and Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries. Let's all welcome Mr. Shigetoshi Ayoma. So maybe let me just kick off this discussion by asking our first panelist, Senator Aquino, being one of the champions of inclusive business in the Philippines and social entrepreneurship. Maybe explain to us what brought you to this advocacy, and maybe share to us what brought you to this advocacy and why you think government should actually play a role, and in what way have you actually, as Senator of this Republic, been able to actually do your part in pushing for inclusive business?
Thank you, Rapa. Good afternoon to everyone. Before becoming a senator, I was actually a social entrepreneur, also with Rapa actually, and we set up different social enterprises in the Philippines. And at some point, when you're doing your social enterprise work, you get to look at the different communities where you're working in, and you get to do well in the communities that you're in, but you get to wonder, how do you achieve scale? And one clear way was for business to come in and provide that larger market that your poorer communities or your smaller enterprises could actually enter. Another way was to get government to actually change policies and make it easier for inclusive business and social enterprises to start. So that was actually what I ran on in 2013, and thankfully I won. And for the past 2.5 years, we've been working on specific legislation that could support our SME development and push for the inclusive economy. So the first was a Go Negosyo law, which actually sets up business centers around the Philippines. To date, we have about 110 that we've put up already. And these centers are set up through DTI, through the Department of Trade, to support your micro, small, and medium enterprises with access to finance, with market linkage, and with mentorship and ease of doing business. Now, Undersecretary Zeni is here, who's in charge of that project. So that was the first law. Oh, she has a fan in the crowd. The second one, connected to inclusive economy, is actually the competition policy. And this was a really tough law to get passed, but after decades, we finally have a competition policy in the Philippines, just signed last July of this year. And it's the first time that the Philippines is recognizing that leveling the playing field does actually support your smaller enterprises so that you can be able to compete even with your larger enterprises. A third one that we passed also very recently is the Youth Entrepreneurship Act, and this creates the pipeline by which entrepreneurs can actually come out. And hopefully, with the right training, more young Filipinos will be taught how to be better entrepreneurs and even have that bent towards inclusive economies and social enterprise. The last one, which was just signed into law in November 3, was the Microfinance NGO Act of the Philippines, which supports our microfinance industry, which is a play for inclusive finance. Because we saw that the inclusive business efforts wouldn't be complete without that inclusive finance piece. So you're trying to create an inclusive finance piece, you're trying to create enabling mechanisms which government probably is in the best position to be in. Well, we're working on that actually, for government to be the enabler for our SMEs. And of course, third is to connect to market. No? And I think that's one gap that maybe until recently we haven't really focused enough on. And now the focus is really, how do you get your community-based enterprises to work with larger companies, in larger supply chains, or how do we get them to larger markets? In the ABAC group, of course, I think Doris is here. We were talking about how to get your SME products all over the APEC and give them an easier time to be traded across borders. So that's the formula that we've been using, creating that linkage to market, providing your inclusive finance piece, at the same time having that support, your enabling mechanisms, your mentorship, to be able to put that whole supply chain or that whole ecosystem together. Now, with regard to government, if you ask a lot of Filipinos, they might probably tell you, we hope government doesn't get in our way. And I think the government employees who are here and the government officials who are here, we see a number of us, Ambassador Tambunting is here and the friends from DTI, we've been trying to reverse that. Reverse that perception that government doesn't help business to grow. And we want to start, and maybe APEC being here and APEC having SMEs as one of its main pillars could be that start, wherein we reorganize to really become that support mechanism for your social enterprises and for your inclusive business. DTI has been, through BOI, of course, has been trying to create that framework wherein business, inclusive business, can be better supported. At the same time, we're trying to work with small and community-based enterprises through our regional office to be able to get our SMEs to a level where they can engage with larger companies. So that's the shift that we're trying to push. And we're hoping that now that inclusive economy is at the front and center, we can really make that big push for the next 15 to 20 years in the country.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. It's very interesting how we are actually very aggressively pushing this whole thing in such short time here in the Philippines. But I'm really very curious how other countries are actually moving towards inclusive business. Of course, the next host country of the APEC, which is Peru, is very much in the spotlight right now to find out. Maybe, Mr. Ambassador, if we may get your views on how does Peru look at inclusive business, and how do you see this panning out insofar as a conversation at the APEC level?
Well, in first place, I would like to thank the government of the Philippines and particularly the Department of Trade and Commerce for organizing this dialogue. We in Peru, I would like to say, think that it's very important to give continuity to the issues that are being prioritized by APEC, not only for 1 year, but to give them continuities in 2 or 3 years, because we think it's very important to strengthen certain policies. Without continuity, there's little strength and there is little possibility of really developing issues. So That's the general view of Peru in regard to the priorities of APEC. In relation to inclusive business or inclusive social policies, we are very, very committed to developing social inclusiveness in Peru. Traditionally, I think in Latin America, inclusiveness have been seen more by the side of the state. That's been the traditional outlook. I think that nowadays we had a Peruvian guest and a Mexican guest, so in Latin America and in general in the world, no, but I'm talking about Peru and a little bit about Latin America. We are starting to understand the advantages of supporting and the inclusive business. In the sense that Latin America is the region that has the greatest disparities in distribution of wealth, even though we are not the poorest region in the world. In the case of Peru, you know, we have had, fortunately, 10 very good years of growth. We have averaged more than 6% growth, and that has allowed us to decrease poverty from 2004 to 2012 from 49 to 30, and extreme poverty from 17 to 9. Still, there's a problem in Peru because our geography is very difficult. We have a thin coast that's a desert, a bigger territory that's a mountain, the Andean mountains, chain mountains, and then the Amazon basin. Poverty is much greater in rural areas. As I said, you know, we are around 30%, but in rural areas, it's double that proportion, it's 60%. So how do you manage to bring out people from poverty? There's many ways. I think investment in education is one way, for example. Infrastructure is another one. They talked about that. Clear politics are very important. But I think the role that the private sector is playing with inclusive businesses is extremely important because it's helping people to build capacity building, and creating innovative ways of people to work and gain an autonomy. Therefore, for us, the inclusive business are very important, and it's one of the issues we would like to keep dealing with during the next APEC meeting as a host. No? We think the potential of inclusive business is very great, and what I heard of the people in the private sector talking, and I agree, I think, with my Peruvian national and Mr. Ayala, that there's two basic things that governments can do, no? Infrastructure and clear politics, because you need both, no? Infrastructure and clear politics. And those politics, if we work them in a bigger structure like APEC, I think will have a greater impact. No? Before they spoke about global value chains, and I think in a globalized world, we need those greater structures so countries don't develop autonomously. So the APEC forum is a wonderful place to work these ideas, to give them shape and to bring forces from the different economies. No? So we are very much looking forward to develop these ideas that we've been hearing here, and to try to give some, how to say in Spanish, you say algunos aportes. In English, I don't know, give something more to the debate, let's say, no?
Yeah.
To this issue. No? So we are very much encouraged and committed to work with this issue of inclusive business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. That's very encouraging. And I think that it further inspires all our panelists to actually also try to bring more of our thoughts and ideas into the conversation so that we can really enhance the dialogue that has to go about, that we need to do on inclusive business going into the next conference in Peru. And therefore, if I may, I think Mexico is one of the also aggressive countries in so far as pursuing inclusive business. Of course, CEMEX example earlier showed that Mexico companies are very much attuned to this whole idea. We were just wondering, how has the government actually played a role in trying to encourage this whole process and trying to get private sector more involved in inclusive business models?
Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you very much for the organization of this panel to the government of Philippines. And thanks for the questions. I would like to explain what Mexico is doing to make a better environment for inclusive business and create what we are considering as a great social impact at large scale too. Let me explain a little bit how Mexico has been now constructing this new environment for inclusive business. I would like to say that over the last 25 years, Mexico has made a dramatic transition from a relatively closed economy to one of the most open countries in the world. Aside from implementing a series of domestic measures to deregulate business activity and encourage private investment, Mexico has embraced also international free trade agreements as a means to promote international competitiveness and export-oriented growth. I would like to say that in the case of Mexico, economic openness has resulted in a larger than expected trade and investment volumes. For example, in the last 20 years, when we negotiate NAFTA and get in place, get into force, and the different free trade agreements that we have been signing, it has been a result. For instance, our trade has multiplied by more than 6 times, while the export increased 7 times, and he giving us a position in the world trade, a really privileged position, because we are the 12th most important trader country worldwide. Regardless of the most tangible benefits of the openness, which translated into increasing growth, trade, and investment, significant changes in the economy were not achieved entirely as expected. We can say that successfully transition to a full open economy, as I mentioned, over the last 20 years, creating competitive industries, for instance, the automotive and aerospace sectors. However, during this same period, the last 25 years, Mexico's annual economic growth was only 2.4%, which prevented the creation of the opportunities and employment required to increase the well-being of Mexicans. Several factors adversely affect the competitiveness and productivity. Our economy lagged behind in the regulation of economic competition, which resulted in increased consumer prices of basic goods, reduced purchasing power, backwardness in fixed telephony and internet broadband coverage, slight effects on poverty reduction, despite numerous social programs, high inequality in income distribution, scarce of credit availability for Mexican businesses, and important challenges in the energy sector due to our dependence on foreign energy. To face these challenges, the current administration assessed the best approach to overcome challenges, to increase competitiveness and the creation of new opportunities to improve the well-being of Mexican citizens, which resulted in motivation for Mexico to pursue the significant reforms. I would like to stress that during the last 3 years, my country achieved the structural reforms that had remained urgent and pending for years, even, I could say, decades, which were necessary to make our country more competitive in the global arena and create better conditions to include the least favored sectors, low-income sectors of the population in the economic growth. The implementation of these reforms include various or several areas of the national life, such as labor, education, telecommunication and economic competitiveness, fiscal and social security, finance, energy, and with the idea to have more inclusive and prosperous Mexico with access to quality education and global responsibility. While the effects of these reforms will be observed in the medium term, we can begin to see some effects that are already impacting positively in the society and the competitiveness of the economy. For instance, talking about the aspects that are now in the direction and we're addressing the inclusive business in the Mexican society. The energy reform will support for the family economy by reducing the price of electricity, gas, and food, and creating and better fuel supply services. Also, will promote the social development by allocating all oil revenues to bolster social spending, long-term savings, and scholarship programs, the universal pension scheme, and productive and technological development projects, and to establish mechanisms to ensure that profits from the energy sector reach communities and foster regional development. Another important impact of these reforms, referring some examples just, is through the financial reform. We have the opportunity to contribute with this reform on economic growth and grant more credit for enterprises and Mexican families. This reform will encourage the development of the Mexican financial system. I would like to mention some areas. One is more access to financial products and services, reduce the cost of credit, strengthen the financial education and the protection of users of financial services, maintain a solid financial sector, and efficiency in financial institutions and its authorities. One of the most important results of this financial reform is that extends the level of credit and make it more accessible for Mexicans. Another example that is important to mention that is the impact of this reform is regarding the integration of SMEs into the market, global market, and we're facilitating the access to private banking funding for young entrepreneurs. This is a program that is now currently in place and is working really well. For instance, an entrepreneurs are interested in opening a new business. They are eligible to benefit for a young credit program, which will back them up to get accredited around $9,000. But if this needs to consolidate an already existing company, this credit can increase to $15,000. On housing, also, there's an important aspect that we have been commenting here as a model to inclusive business. We establish a national policy of housing, which consists in a new focus model to promote the orderly and sustainable development of the sector to improve and regularize urban housing, as well as to control and improve rural housing. There are several examples that we are now having in the implementation of this policy, but the most important is the coordination and having a better interagency coordination that has been also an important factor to create this kind of synchronization between the policies that are having the federal and the local and municipal government. Also, we are moving in these aspects of the housing toward a model of intelligent and sustainable urban development. Credits and grants from the federal government will be directed to the promotion of the orderly urban growth and benefiting also the rural aspects. I think this is just some examples that we are now having in the aspects that how the structural reform are impacting Mexico. And for us, it's really important because as I mentioned, these several 11 structural reforms that are putting in place are now paving the ground for to create this more better environment to facilitate trade, facilitate the access to families, facilitate the access to entrepreneurs to get this growth quality. So maybe we can elaborate a little bit later how these structural reforms are aligned with the APEC objectives, because also we can exchange our experience and what we are doing in this aspect and the APEC agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peñara. It's interesting to see how governments are actually trying to create enabling environments also internally within country. I had a casual chat with our next panelist over lunch, and I was asking him the question, knowing that Japan is one of the most developed countries, and also given that it's also more known as really investing in high technology, I was actually wondering to what extent is Japan really creating an environment to actually create models not only within Japan, or creating government interventions that actually address inclusive business in other countries. And I would like to ask our friend from Japan whether he could share some of the things that his government is able to do, not only within Japan, but also in other countries.
Thank you, Mr. Lapa. Okay, anyway, it is my great pleasure to speak on the way forward for inclusive business in APEC. Okay, so today I will discuss only two things: Japan's effort for inclusive business and inclusive business and earthly innovation for rural development and poverty alleviation. Then I think I am a little bit different from many of you from government offices here. Actually, many government officers from here is the Foreign Ministry or Foreign Department or Trade Ministries. I come from the Ministry of Agriculture. So in the second part, I will discuss, just briefly touch upon the agricultural flavors. So first, let me explain the government efforts. But anyway, why the Japanese government is making effort to promote inclusive business? As the previous speaker said, that the inclusive business is should be initiated by private sectors. I think that's right. But in our understanding is that we are not good at the familiar with the inclusive business models. So now we have some kind of setup. So today I explain Japan Inclusive Business Support Center and the JETRO and JICA. And this slide shows the Japanese Inclusive Business Support Center, which was established in 2010 by METI, Japan's Ministry of Economic Trade and Industry. This support center provides centralized information like policies, related organization, country information, and the consultation services. And let's move to the JETRO, Japan External Trade Organization. This JETRO is to collect and provide field information and relate with foreign government offices and private companies in developing economies for future business matching. So JETRO is good for business matching. Why is that JETRO is promoting? The reason is to support Japanese companies who are not familiar with BOP business. And so far, JETRO has supported more than 100 business matching since establishment 2012. Next is JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency. This organization provides funding support for the feasibility study on inclusive business projects. Actually, JICA is a kind of official assistance agency. So for the sake of the global contribution by Japanese government, JICA is promoting inclusive business. So far, JICA has supported more than 100 feasibility studies since 2010. Okay, this slide shows a lesson from Japan's experience, and I would like to highlight the importance of the points to be examined, the important alignment in the company's strategies. Many Japanese companies have succeeded in the area of high-valued market, like vehicles, motor vehicle, IT, something. But so the challenge that the proponents of inclusive business in a Japanese company have faced is how they persuade the company's top management, who are not always familiar with inclusive business, in the context of company strategy. So that's why alignment in the company strategy is very, very important for a Japanese company. Now I can summarize the Japanese government is setting up to promote inclusive business. So first, Japan Inclusive Business Support Center is a kind of a pilot or focal point of the information. And the JETRO is good for business matching for Japanese companies. And the JICA is a kind of a funding institution. So now I would like to introduce a recent movement for inclusive business by my ministry, Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, MAF of Japan. A Japanese food-related company have a lot of experience on improvement of nutrition. Based on this experience, Japanese food-related company have contributed nutrition improvement in developed economies under BOP business. Left side shows that Ajinomoto Cocoa Plus project in Ghana or Malawi. And the right hand is a Kikoman. This is soy sauce project. This is done in the from Kenya. So actually, they two companies initiated by themselves to a kind of CSR or BOP. So based on this experience by Japanese companies, now we are preparing an establishment of public-private partnership platform, support platform, in order to promote the international rollout of those nutrition improvement projects for possible future inclusive business projects. Okay, so now I would like to move to the second topics, inclusive business and Afri innovation. For Afri innovation, I think nobody knows Afri innovation. Yes. Right. Right. But I changed my scenario. Okay, so before I explain the Afri innovation itself, I would like to mention about the food value chain. Okay, food value chain is a set of processes that range from agricultural production to storage, processing, distribution, and consumption with a view to producing high-value added products and to deliver producers such added value to the final consumers. So perhaps traditionally, agriculture ministry try to focus on their effort to stage basis, production stage, manufacturing processing stage, distribution. So we trying to category-wise or stage-wise approaches. Now we are trying to move to chain, like a chain. So this, we are trying to change or added our change to add the new policies. So Afri innovation already, somebody says that Afri innovation is agri innovation, forest innovation, and fishery innovation. Actually, this is a coined word by our ministry. And Afri innovation is adding value to agriculture, forestry, and fishery products in innovative ways by making a new combination and creating a value chain. The purpose is to expand the possibility of agriculture and fishery and forestry as an integrated industry as a result of movement from primary industry to tertiary industries. So Afri-innovation is almost the same of 6 industries. Perhaps 6 industries is not so popular, I think. But anyway, it's easy to understand. Everybody understands first industry or primary industry, let's say agriculture. The second industry or the industrial industry. The third one is the services industry. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6. Or 1 multiply, 2 multiply, 3 multiply is all 6. So anyway, we integrate all industry. That's the concept of the 6 industries. So these 6 industries, I think that the 6 industrialization revitalize agriculture and the rural areas, and also it would improve income levels of the producers. So now Japanese Ministry of Agriculture are trying to focus on or emphasizing to the international community Afri-innovation and value chain approach. So we are trying to put some words in the political statements. Then this is a kind of an example of the feasibility study for inclusive business using food value chain approach in the Philippines. The project site was Quezon City, not Quezon City, Quezon Province and Nueva Ecija. Most agricultural products distribution in the Philippines has been left up to smaller broker or middlemen. Farmers have sold their products at their asking price, regardless of market situation, as well as their product quality. This pilot project, funded by JICA, supported by a Japanese IT company, e-Supporting, and implemented by local producers association and agricultural cooperatives, has been changing this situation. Now the farmers' unions systematically collect and analyze the data such as amount of products that come from farmers, market prices of their products, and amount of wasted products. So as a result of this, the farmers' unions now are able to give systematic guidance to their farmers on production and the sales. So I wish that using these IT data, the farmers' unions would create some Afri-innovation in the future. And this slide shows an ongoing proposal by a private company, e-Supporting, based on the success of a pilot project in the Philippines. As far as I know, the Japanese IT company is currently discussing a system introduction to the Agri-Pinoy Trading Center project. Also, the company is planning to roll it out to ASEAN region. Okay, so and this slide, okay, so the topic is a little bit change to the SDG, as a previous speaker already mentioned. And in SDG, okay, there is some mention about the importance of increase of farmers' income as well as investment into agriculture. And also importance of agriculture investment for rural development is mentioned. This is the 2014 APEC Minister Meeting on Food Security, Beijing Declaration. So there's mentioning investment. But there is a question. Question we are facing is how to increase investment for rural development and poverty alleviation. So in my opinion, one of the answers to the question is inclusive business. So in this end, I would like to conclude my presentation in 3 sentences. APEC should promote inclusive business for rural development and poverty alleviation. And Afri-innovation is useful too. And now you understand what the Afri-innovation is. And inclusive business is a solution for the investment into rural development and poverty alleviation. Thank you for your attention and patience.
Thank you, Mr. Oyama. You know, I have to say that the government of Japan has really been very instrumental in actually promoting inclusive business in the Philippines. Again, in many, many ways. I was just mentioning to Mr. Oyama that, in fact, JICA is one of the biggest investors in the Bangsamoro area, where we are trying to actually spur development activity to actually ensure that peace and development begin in that region. And I think JICA is very much involved in really creating an enabling environment to actually help the Bangsamoro government, the armed government, to actually put in place much needed infrastructure, not to mention also some financing facilities that actually would encourage investments in the Bangsamoro. That's why we'd like to thank you very much to Mr. Oyama and the Japanese government for all the help. So I think just to pick up some of the major points that I heard from the panelists, we can see that this whole idea of inclusive business is really so new that even different countries have different levels of involvement in trying to actually define the role that government plays in promoting the whole idea of inclusive business. Because of course, in essence, inclusive business begins from the private sector, and I think that was very evident in the discussion in the earlier panel. But more and more, as we see the need to actually create more enabling environments, more incentives rather than regulations. What do you think? And I address this to the rest, to all the panelists and whoever wants to answer the question. What do you think moving forward, and as we actually try to push the agenda forward, even in the next APEC meeting? What do you think are the areas where government should actually start? Governments, especially APEC governments, what do you think APEC government should take up insofar as enabling environment mechanisms to actually spur inclusive business? Please feel free, whoever is ready to answer.
No, you know, again, as I said, I think the APEC is formed in the most dynamic region in the world. Apart from that, we have serious problems, especially in some countries more than others, of poverty, levels of poverty. No? So the APEC is a forum of the Pacific Basin, Asia-Pacific Basin, that's, I think, ideal for dealing with these issues, creating mechanisms, tendencies to allow countries to collaborate. For example, in Latin America, we have created the Pacific Alliance. No, it's Mexico, Chile, and Peru, and Colombia. You know, three of us are the only members from Latin America of APEC. No, there's in Southeast Asia the ASEAN group. No, and we are very similar, and we have common problems, and we are members of APEC, and we have countries like Japan, US, China. I don't know, countries that have bigger economies and that can help us, and I think we can work. It's complementary, no? So the APEC is, I think, an excellent forum to work these mechanisms, create tendencies that will help this very dynamic region in the world that can become a model of development. And again, I heard those things of global value chains, and we are in that area, no, that we can create. That's one thing that I think it's important, relating these e-businesses to a bigger market, to integrate part of that global chain of values, not only to create a small value, improve a little bit in what they do, but to become part of the world. In Peru, one of the problems we have is we are very far away from everywhere. No, when I came to Southeast Asia, my mother's still alive. She was telling me, "You are going so far away," you know. And when I've been here, I think I am so far away. You know, Peru is so far away. You know, because Eurasia is the biggest mass land and the biggest demography. Latin America, we are around 60 million. All of Latin, from Mexico down south. So it's small, it's very difficult to integrate in Eurasia. You have the steppes, so that's why Genghis Khan could conquer by horse only. We cannot do it. But so I think in modern times, the challenge of defeating poverty to become a more trustful society, communities, to improve standards of living, the APEC can have a lead worldwide, no? And especially for the countries that are members to work, for example, Peru and Philippines, to say something. I'm here in the Philippines, I'm Peruvian, so, and, but in a bigger forum, no? Not just two countries, because that's a little bit outdated, I think, no? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Senator Aquino.
Firstly, Ambassador, I hope even if you feel that you're far away from home, that you're always welcome in the Philippines, though, first and foremost. Probably, Rapa, you can look at where what government's role is in an inclusive ecosystem. Because one thing I think we tend to forget is that the inclusive business, per se, is just one part of the whole ecosystem. At the end of the day, you need to have your community partners and your community organizations ready to engage the inclusive business. And this is where, at least in the Philippines, where some social enterprises play a role, and where some local governments and national government programs play a role as well. So, a lot of the effort here, I think, is in developing your marginalized communities to be able to engage with their inclusive business. So that's a lot of capacity building work. A lot of trial and error is being done on that end, although there are a lot of good case studies already. So maybe one area of cooperation could be the sharing of the enabling factors for the whole ecosystem in different areas. No? I don't think any of the APEC economies can safely say that they're already an inclusive economy, but definitely there are successful models in each or in most of the APEC economies. And I think that ability to pinpoint what worked where, because you'll probably find that the successes are in different parts of the ecosystem. Maybe that effort to see what works in different areas and in what context, that can be shared among the different countries. And probably the ones who are slightly ahead can help the ones who are slightly behind, so that at least we can move forward together. So that capacity building, I think, to tackle inclusive business and inclusive economies, I think, is still a long ways to go. And that's something where we can cooperate on.
Maybe just to follow up on that, that point, and also to the point that Mr. Ambassador mentioned. Therefore, shouldn't there be mechanisms at the APEC that actually allows for this kind of continuing conversation to happen? Because again, other than different levels of government involvement in IB, is also the different levels of or different roles that even wealthier countries can play vis-a-vis not so wealthy countries. And therefore, the roles of countries or economies in trying to get inclusive business in an entire regional perspective may have to have more conversations at different levels, of course, no? And again, seeing how can each country actually work together. May have some related comments from our friends in Mexico, please.
Yes, I think since the presentation of our colleagues that were representing governments here, we can see, as you mentioned, different levels that we are now addressing the aspects of inclusive business. I think the APEC agenda is really broad, and we're working in several aspects exactly to create a better environment for inclusive business. For instance, we are now having the renew agenda for structural reform. This is an important aspect because in that agenda we're working for the next 5 years until 2020 in aspects related to regulatory cooperation. That's an important aspect, how the institution can create a better environment for have a more coherent regulatory framework and facilitate the trade and investment for the business people. Of course, thinking in people that have low income and entrepreneurs. Also, an aspect related to the global value chain, There are several projects where we are now working. Even there is a proposal that is going to be now supported by the leaders and is already was supported by the ministers. In a way, the Boracay Action Plan agenda, that is a really, really ambitious agenda for the next years. In a way, how we're going to integrate the MSMEs to the global value chain. There are several projects that how we're having the traceability to identify how is the participation of the entrepreneurs, how is the participation of SMEs in this global chain, in a way to find some aspects to support the participation and increase the participation of the SMEs of the global of the region in the region and globally, how we want to increase the participation. Also, another aspects that has to see with the Cebu Action Plan, that is the aspect of finance, when we are also creating a better environment with guidelines really, really clear how we are going to work in the coming years, in a way also to support SMEs. And the idea is also integrate people with low income to this process of the growth. So these are some examples that how the APEC agenda are now dealing, addressing these aspects of inclusive business. As a government, as Mexico is doing now, is in our public policy, we are now assessing how this aspect we can exchange our experience, how we can contribute to this agenda, and how we can contribute to this quality growth. So this is the way that we're addressing these kind of issues, and with this kind of objective in mind. Create our internal quality growth, create more efficient system for great business, supporting the segments of population low income, and of course, this also is contributing to the global aspects of the APEC. This is the way that we're addressing these kind of aspects and the link we're having internally and with APEC agenda.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Oyama, you want to add to the...
Yes, okay. Actually, I have two comments. The first one is the importance of raising awareness in top management of their companies. Actually, there are two kinds of study done by JETRO and JICA. And the report said that there was some bottleneck in Japanese companies. One is the lack of support of top management, and the second one is the lack of access or difficulty to the access of finance, and the third one is a lack of to find out a key person to implement a project. So APEC is a good position to raising awareness. I think that is one comment. The second one is how the APEC should address these issues. APEC is, as you know, that a unique setting up. So we have APEC. Then inclusive business should be done by business sector itself. So maybe perhaps we ask APEC to discuss or address this issue and to consolidate some recommendation for government. That's one. Another one is the government side. Government officers share experience or learn each other. So perhaps there we need perhaps a focal point. Then focal point might be investment expert groups, so IEG. So IEG might be a focal point, and other APEC fora should support the discussion. Okay, the last one, in addition, with regard to the agriculture, we have a good setting up, that is a PPFS, Policy Partnership for Food Security. These forum partnership discussed by private sector and the government. Then private sector, as I mentioned, Ajinomoto. Ajinomoto is one of the members of the PPFS. So we may ask PPFS to address the issues. And next year, there is a ministerial meeting on food security. So maybe we can do something to improve to promote inclusive business in APEC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So these are very good proposals. I hope our friends in APEC are taking note of this very valuable recommendation so that we can actually take very concrete steps and courses of action moving forward. But maybe just to pick up on, so we have about less than 10 minutes to go, and I was instructed by our head facilitator to make sure that we finish on time. Maybe just as a last question, just to pick up from the comment of Mr. Oyama on the need to actually make business leaders more aware or more conscious about the need for inclusive business. Actually, I'm asking this question in a way as a rebuttal to the question that my co-moderator asked the business panel when he asked the business panel what they expect from government. I think in turn, I would like to give our friends from government their turn to actually share what do they expect from the business community. I think it's important to see how these key players of growth in every economy need to see what are the interests of governments or what government is thinking insofar as working closely with the private sector so that moving forward we can also see what issues or what concerns we should actually bring to conversations at the APEC and even the global APEC conversation. So maybe anybody again can start and share what they expect from the business community.
Well, the cases in the Philippines where large corporations engage in inclusive activities or in an inclusive business model really showed leadership from the CEOs or the country managers. So maybe leadership and enlightenment. Enlightenment because even here, we're still trying to convince more business leaders to get into inclusive business. And in the press con earlier, I was actually quite surprised that a lot of these actually don't even happen with government incentives. No? It happens with that leadership and enlightenment starting from the private sector and government providing that enabling environment. But let me go a step further, Rapa, and maybe one thing that will make sure that businesses also listen, and some of us here I think are politicians, no, is if our people also use their purchasing power to support inclusive businesses. We don't really talk about which businesses are inclusive enough. We don't talk about the good practices of a lot of our businesses in our country or even probably in the APEC that the people themselves will support the inclusive businesses with their own hard-earned cash. And I think even more than maybe leaders or political leaders telling the private sector what to do, if the people themselves have that mindset that we want to support or we want to be part of the good things that this company is doing by supporting them with our money, then I think the business leaders are sure to make that decision. It's not even a tough decision, no? It's just a decision to really go down this inclusive business path.
Thank you, Senator Aquino. Yes, Mr. Ambassador. Mr. Pineda? Mr. Pineda, please.
Okay. So that's an interesting question because we're going to be starting this kind of circle basis in a way that, as was mentioned by the business panel, they, for instance, responding to your question, what we're expecting for the private sector, we're expecting investment, of course, because we need investment to create jobs, to create growth, etc. So I am saying as a cycle basis, since we are expecting investment and the response for private sector, we are expecting that you facilitate my investment. So to find the common ground, I think the APEC agenda and also the internal agenda for each economy is giving us the response. We need to work internally in a way to find the common ground to create a better environment for investment, as a government facilitate the trade and investment, and of course in this translated into we are working also in the APEC as APEC economies is exactly addressing that kind of situation. How we're going to facilitate the trade, how we're going to facilitate that the work can have more investment in a way that is a mandate of our leaders, have a quality growth and sustainable growth. So I think this is that we're demanding for the private sector.
Thank you. Very good. Yeah, very good point. Mr. Ambassador.
Yes, well, I agree with my colleague from Mexico. No, what the private sector does is invest. So we, I think, would like to see quality investment in terms of social needs, because many times, and I think somebody in the panel, the first three speakers, told that Philippines has grown, and that happens in many countries, Peru also, that there's a big growth of the middle class, but we have to look also to the lower income and poor people, because if you have so big disequilibriums, it's a risk for the community, for the stability and the well-being of the community. That doesn't justify crimes because poor people, tend to do that. No, that's not true, but it doesn't help for the stability and a healthy network of society. So we have to give clear politics. I think that's what they said, good infrastructure, education, fight against corruption. Those, I think, are basic elements, a good justice system. But from the private sector is investment looking with a social outlook, and aggressive and not charitable, as it has been said here, because it's good business. But it has to be innovative in the sense that these people are not part of the formal economy. Sometimes they don't exist, let's say, quote unquote, no, of course. But in the formal economy, they are not taken as part of that. So I think that's what the government should ask from the private sector.
Thank you. Ms. Oyama?
Yes. Okay. Perhaps sharing their success story is the most important, or one of the most important things for private as well as government sectors. So so I wish that this kind of event, not event, we should try to provide this kind of event to share knowledge, share experience, share best practice. So through these events, we would like to raising awareness and everybody change our mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to, at this point, I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing these very, very insightful thoughts. One of the things that we were discussing among our colleagues or our friends in DTI and also some of the organizing committee, when we were trying to figure out how could inclusive business really be relevant in the overall theme of APEC's building inclusive economies. And one of the things that we sort of were talking on top of our heads was really this whole idea of should countries actually start measuring the extent of how inclusive their economies are. Of course, again, as Mr. Jaime Zobel de Ayala also mentioned, we often measure ourselves with our GDP, our GNP, our competitive indices. I mean, we measure all of these things primarily to show how we as economies actually perform in the whole effort of wealth creation and generating productivity in each of our countries. But again, this whole question of inclusiveness brings us to a different framing of how our economies should behave. And again, it also always reminds us the need to actually frame the work that we do on how it impacts the lives of many people. And I guess I would like to end by thanking again the panel and also the earlier panel for actually giving us a lot of valuable insights on how we should really continue the conversation on really promoting inclusive business and improving or actually creating inclusive economies. And hopefully we look forward to the next APEC meeting in Peru, and hopefully this agenda continues to be in that conversation. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.